How's it going, everybody? Kasabi here today with another episode of ShowOff in the logo editor, and today I want to go over the mask and erase features in the logo editor. So as you can kind of see here, I have the first few steps of a Chicago Cubs C logo, and I just have to put the finishing touches on it. And there are a couple different options I could do, and I'll show you the difference as to why I pick one over the other. So to complete the red C in the middle, I would have to put in another circle and a triangle tool to put that gap between the top and the bottom of the C. So first we would have this circle here, and then we would have a triangle that would kind of cut off the rest of the C here. But if I were to use the shapes as they normally come, then I have this other part of the triangle that I have to worry about not clipping into the other part of the blue that you see there. Or I would have to resize it just enough where the edges don't go into the blue circle portion. But with the Cubs logo, you don't really have this much of a gap between the C. It's usually a little bit larger, so you can fit the word Cubs in the middle with the U, B, and the S. So your options are, you could just very faintly do the triangle so it doesn't clip into anything else, and maybe do that a few times. And there you go, now you have a C. It took you a few extra steps to create those with the triangles. But since you used the extra few steps, these two triangles here and here may not necessarily be exact. They may not be symmetrical. So therein kind of lies a bit of the problem with just using shapes and not utilizing the mask and erase tool. You would have to build this with a few extra shapes and also worry about getting everything exact, not clipping into other portions of the logo, and so forth. The other option is using the mask tool. So I could use this exact same white square, go to more options here in the start menu, and mask. You'll notice that it didn't make any changes whatsoever, but what the mask tool essentially does is masks the part of the logo that it's directly on top of. So the mask would be for this red circle right here. If I were to move it to the other white circle and then move it over this way, you can kind of see that the part of the white circle is blocked by the mask tool. So that's the thing with the mask tool, is you kind of have to work in layers and be smart about how you build the original logo. In this case, I just have a few circles to work with, so there's not really too much to it. You just have a few different colored circles, starting with the back white circle, the big blue circle, and then a few more colors in between. Now, if I were to move this circle over back here, and then use the same triangle that I had before, and use the mask function, you can see when I go larger with the triangle, let me unmask it so you can see how large this is. When it's masked, it doesn't affect the other shapes around it. It just does the red one that it's directly on top of. And then what you can do is rotate the triangle to exactly 270 for a crisp right angle and move it such where it is completely symmetrical across both the top and bottom portions of the circle. Doesn't clip into anything else, doesn't affect other portions of the logo, and you saved yourself a couple steps for this example. The other thing I would highly recommend is changing the colors of the mask features themselves to a different color that doesn't match another color in the design itself. In this case, you're probably going to keep the Cubs logos the same actual colors that they use, which is blue, red, and white. But say I wanted to invert a couple of these colors for a secondary design, such as switching the red and the white in the middle portion. Kind of a cool design if you look at it, but now I have a little bit of a question mark here when it comes to the mask layers versus the actual white shape that I want to use for my design. The only difference you can really discern is the words mask down here, but even that kind of blends with the white shape as you look at it here at the bottom of the screen. So what I recommend is you use blue, red, and white in this design. I would pick a completely separate color that I know I'm not going to use, such as pink, to differentiate the mask colors from the rest. To do that, just go to the change color feature, and you can see I use pink here quite a bit since it doesn't match a lot of my designs. Go back to mask those layers, and there you go. Now I can definitely differentiate between the mask colors that I have and these other solid colors that are a part of the design. If you download some of my personal work in the vault, you'll see this quite a bit. So you'll see a lot of mask layers that are neon pink, neon green in some cases, just so you can kind of know what to change in case you were to change the colors of design later on. The mask features, since you know that there's not going to be pink or green in the design that you're changing, will kind of serve as a guide as to which shapes to avoid. Now, as a creator, I also use the mask function about 95% of the time. The other 5%, I may use the erase feature, but it's a little bit harder to work with consistently, and I'll show you why. So we're back to our Cubs colors here, but if I were to change these mask layers over to the erase feature, it does essentially the same thing. It takes out the part of the C that I want, but it does so for every layer. So you can see here now that we have the grid showing up in the background, and anything across this eraser layer right here is completely wiped out. So the erase function I only use for maybe a couple of situations. One of my most recent examples here is this logo I did called the Pretzel Eaters, where I have a few different variety designs, some of which he has arms, some of them he's holding a bat, and others not. If this was, however, the only logo of its type in the logo vault, and I wanted to get rid of the arms because the one with just the pretzel doesn't exist, I could go into this menu and do the eraser tool, and that would wipe out all of these shapes altogether. There would be some limited patchwork that I'd have to do, such as taking out some of that black portion and redoing the blue outline on the outer half. But the erase tool can be very effective in getting rid of parts of a design that you might download from the vaults and may not necessarily want. So again, with this Pretzel Eaters design that I've already made, like obviously I've made a couple without the arms for that benefit, but if you were to find a similar image to this one in the vault and you wanted to tweak certain parts of it, this would save you a lot of time instead of going into the shapes that the creator originally had and trying to figure out everything from there. Instead, I can do the eraser tool and just erase certain parts of it and fix it up with limited work involved. So there you go. I just finished up the design. Took me about 8 to 10 shapes, only about a minute of work. And now we have that pretzel design that I just did the eraser tool without the arms, and formed it into something else entirely. As you can see here, if I were to delete or cut these eraser values, you can see the arms come right back to life here. The erase feature can also be very effective if you're unsure where the masking occurs or what layer you want to find to get rid of. So if I wanted to get rid of these spirally type things, there's a few different layer shapes here that I'd have to go through and mask each one. So here's part of the spirals. You have these 2 dots right here, plus these kind of 3 hashes. You would have to mask every single one of those layers with the shape on top of it. Instead, you can use the erase tool and just get rid of everything all at once together by going to the end of the grid with the layer shapes and just placing a shape in front of it like so. The eraser is transparent as well, so all of these eraser tools that you see and the squigglies that I'm clearing here, you will not see in the design if I were to put it on like a baseball cap or put it as my main logo, anything like that. And now with just a few shapes with the eraser tool, I've cleaned up this design to make it more personal and maybe a bit more sharp to appear on a baseball cap instead of having a few accents that I may not necessarily want. Again though, I definitely recommend masking most of the time, and it does have plenty of uses. So for example, I have a lot of solid text like this one where I could very well build all of these letters by scratch, such as the B, the double E, and the S. But as you can kind of see here, I just originally started with this shape right here. Let me bring it to the forefront. This white rectangle. And then I built it with a bunch of masks to make it as polished as possible. So you have a couple shapes going straight across the top, a couple curving the shape that I want, and it just ends up making it a bit more of a clean design. And I did so again with the Arizona at the top of this design. So here's all of the shapes bit by bit to complete the A. A few spacing mechanisms that I do to make sure it's consistent from letter to letter. The added benefit of doing the mask tool as opposed to maybe making these letters separately too is if you want it to be a two-tone color, maybe give it a bit of a gradient or something similar, you can actually copy these exact same shapes and just paste them over again, change the secondary color again to yellow, and then all you need is one more mask element like so. And there you go. Now you have a two-tone logo that looks a whole lot cooler. Because you're copying the exact same thing over, you already have these letters accounted for, and then all you need to do is just cut it in half or whatever kind of gradient that you want for the logo itself. It would be much more efficient and much more clean than to build all that yellow part shape by shape and try and match it up to the original design with a lot of guesswork. This one just completely cuts it into a 30-second decision by copying the shape, changing the color, and then just adding this one square on top of it. There's a whole plethora of other uses for the mask tool. I've been using it a lot over the last few years especially, and I think it's led to an increased quality of my designs. So again, I don't use the eraser very much. It has some limited uses, but mostly if you're trying to Frankenstein some images together, cut out certain parts, and kind of clean things up if there's a certain part of a logo that's in the vault that you don't want. Definitely would recommend the eraser tool to save you some work. but the mask tool can lead to some really clean and crisp designs as you get to work with it. More than just like the few circles than the Cubs one utilized. Like, there are so many uses that you can do for mask tools. It's basically just mastering all of the different layers and knowing how to build the logo shape by shape. So if you can effectively plan out how you're going to build your logo, I would kind of liken it to making a PowerPoint. You have all of these images, there's the functions that say send it to the front or send it to the back. This grid right here at the bottom works very similarly. At the number 1 at the very end of the left is what you're going to have at the very back of your image, and then the ones at the very right are going to be at the top. So you can kind of build things using the mask tool and the shapes effectively. All you need to do is make sure that the mask part that you want is directly to the right of the shape that you have in question. Apologies if this was very long-winded. I could work on being more concise for some of these tutorials, but I hope everything makes sense. If there is anything that you have a question on, feel free to leave a comment in the video to let me know what you're working with, and I can maybe assist you from there. Otherwise, the mask tool is one of your best friends, and I hope that these tips will help you utilize them a bit more effectively. Again, use that color trick. Make sure that you have colors that are separate from your design, so if you wanted to go back and change the color later, it's much easier to know what you're working with. I think that just about covers everything in the main menus. We've gone over the different L1 and R1 menus, such as the rotate, scale, skew, and expand tools. And then most everything that you see here, it's pretty simple. Change color, change shape, and then like cut, copy, paste, things like that. There's also the flip functions. I don't think that necessitates an entire video, but that pretty much covers all of the basic controls for the logo editor in MLB the Show. If there's any other complex tips that you need a little bit of assistance with, or any other ideas, like I said, feel free to drop them in the comment section. I would be happy to make more logo tutorials for you guys. But that'll do it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching this edition of Show Off. This is Kasabi signing off for now. We'll see you in the next episode.